Joining me in the studio is the Treasury Minister, Alfred Cannan. Thank you for coming in this morning, Mr. Cannan. First of all, I use the phrase nationalisation. Is this nationalisation?
No, it's absolutely not nationalisation, John. The current situation with the IOM Steam Packet Company, which, as we all recognise and understand and now have had confirmed from our due diligence report, is it is a well-run and highly profitable company. But the current ownership arrangements around that company have become increasingly unacceptable. And we've got a situation where this company, and in fact it's more than a company to the Isle of Man, it's our lifeline business, has increasingly become a tool for asset managers, investment managers, hedge funds to use as just a money-making item and to, I would suggest, line their pockets over many years. The Isle of Man government, the Council of Ministers, looked very carefully at the options going forward. Even under a new user agreement in place with the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company, we could see no change to that situation. And in fact, it was our view that replacing with a like-for-like agreement on a user agreement would simply see the company move into new
But if the government are the owners, is that not nationalisation?
And we would have seen increasing stability. Now, the government has set out a clear plan on the Tynwald order paper. I described it to my Tynwald colleagues as a three-phase plan. The first phase being the acquisition of 100% of the shares. The second phase being some restructuring taking place around the finances. In other words, £76 million would be placed into the company as debt. We would look for the company to refinance that and for government to get its £76 million back within the next 12 months and £48 million into share equity. And we would carry out a process to identify how that money could also be de-risked by bringing in shareholders or partners alongside us. So this is not nationalisation, John. This is a
but if the government's the owner,
this is a programme of stabilisation to bring the steam packets ownership under control and to put in place, by having that control over the ownership, the right new user agreements and the right relationship between the executive management and the shareholder, the Isle of Man government, to ensure that all parties and the company are operating absolutely in the best interest.
Well,
and we stop the nonsense of having the best parts of the company, the highly profitable parts, simply being stripped out and returned off to banks in London and
how much does the steam pack actually own out there? It doesn't own an awful lot of land around. It's been sold. It's got two. Do we know how much the Ben and the Cannan are valued at, for instance?
We have done, as you might imagine, extensive due diligence around this whole business, and we have had very good reports back on both the Ben and the Cannan from the advisors, the professional shipping company that has advised us. And in fact, that report clearly states to us that, in fact, the engine hours in both those vessels are below that of what might be expected in similar vessels operating around the world.
So one careful owner, but it's still an ageing vessel, isn't it?
Yes, and we realise that there has to be plans for new ships, and
have
the company
any?
has to operate. So we have projected into the cash flow projections how the steam packet, and understood from our due diligence, how the steam packet plans to deal with the potential new ship acquisition. We've allowed in our projections for the steam packet to build up cash reserves to be able to pay for that.
A lot of people think that means they'll put the fares up to actually make that money back. You mentioned 76 million. What is that figure?
Well, first and foremost, John, I mean, the reason why we are making this acquisition is to bring stability, and also because, frankly, the user agreement, certainly as it currently stands, is not really working in the best interests of the island. For example, we have an RPI figure in there for inflationary costs increase, and in all reality, when we come to renegotiate we would be looking to make changes to that user agreement whereby some of those allowances for price increases would be restrained according to circumstances.
So
but
can we tell the operators, the steam packet, how high to jump when you say we want this and they'll have to do it?
No, what we are doing here is we are stabilising a situation. We are going to refinance and restructure so that the public finances get replenished in a reasonably quick time, and the shipping company, the IOM Steam Packet Company, will operate in an efficient, effective commercial manner at arm's length from government, and we will have in place the necessary governance arrangements with the new user agreement and a new relationship between the shareholder and the board to ensure that all parties are acting in the best interests to ensure that we get the best return from what is our strategic lifeline.
But can I ask you, is Tynwald going to say yes? Have you sounded out members?
Well, I presented to members yesterday morning. I am going to present again to members on Thursday, giving them much more detail around the due diligence that has been undertaken in these circumstances. I am coming, the Council of Ministers is coming to Tynwald, having carefully considered this matter and in full support of the proposition. And as I said, this is not just a simple transaction and the business is going to be nationalised. This is a transaction that involves a number of stages. Once we get through phase one, if Tynwald say yes on Tuesday, then we enter phase two. We carry out the arrangements around new user agreement, around putting some of our own directors onto the board, looking at the refinancing options, coming back with proposals for investors or shareholders, and Tynwald will then approve those on a case-by-case basis, and at the end of that process we'll be into phase three, and effectively the new company, the new IOM Steam Packet Company, will be up and running.